Hello everyone, this is Trevor T. Verges. Welcome to Design Twist. Today I'm going to be designing my take on Toriel and Asgore Dreamer from Deltarune with possible designs that they could have in Chapter 3. I'm a huge Deltarune fan and I haven't done a video for it yet, so I thought with Chapter 3 and 4 very quickly approaching that it's time for me to do some kind of Deltarune video, and there's really no way better to celebrate that than to do my own little theory and share my thoughts on where I think Chapter 3 and 4 are going, or at least where I want them to go. If you keep up with Deltarune theories in the same way that I do, you'll know that Chapter 3 is definitely going to feature Toriel, and we know that Kris, Susie, and Toriel are confirmed people that are going to be in the Dark World. I should say that this video will contain spoilers for Deltarune up to Chapter 2, but if you're watching this, you've probably already played both. If not, go play it and come back to my video. I don't care if you leave. Before you watch this, go play it, or if you don't care about spoilers, it's all good. Since Kris left the door open at the end of Chapter 2, I think it's implied, or at least we're supposed to assume, that since Toriel called the cops, either Napstablook or Undyne are going to show up to try to help in this chapter. But I personally think, unless Toby has a crazy random backstory up his sleeve, I think it's not going to be either of them. And I think this is the perfect time to bring Asgore into the story. Obviously, there is some kind of hidden or so far unrevealed story between Asgore and the rest of the police when it comes to Des's disappearance. I know there's a lot of Deltarune brain rot theory crafting to be had here. I'm not going to speculate on who's the knight or what Gaster's doing, but my take on why Kris is doing all this in Chapter 1 and 2 to set up this Dark World is that they need to resolve certain things in their life. Similar to how Noelle's experience in the Dark World affected her, or probably will affect her relationship going forward with her mother and father. I think Kris's Dark World is going to contextualize their relationship with their parents, or at least based on Chapter 1 and 2, Kris really saw how experiences within Dark Worlds can affect people's personalities. Susie completely opened up and switched from being a bully who picked on Kris to being their best friend now. So Kris, more than anybody, probably understands whether they're the knight or a vessel or not, or whatever they are. They understand the power of a Dark World. And regardless of what theory you have of what's going on between Kris and Gaster and the player, somewhere within Kris there is a normal kid whose parents are divorced and they don't really get closure because their dad likes to pretend everything is okay, somehow he's gonna win Toriel back, which is super misguided and pathetic, but in an endearing way, in my opinion. He's so in love that he doesn't imagine for a second that there's a way Toriel could ever move on. But Toriel is completely over it and just doesn't acknowledge it at all, which is just as unhealthy for Kris to be stuck in the middle of that, where one parent is pretending nothing's wrong and the other parent is pretending nothing exists. There's no history there, we're not going to talk about it, we're not going to acknowledge it. It really puts Kris in an awkward spot, and I think there's a possibility that Kris might want closure there. And while I think revealing all the secrets with what happened when Asgore was a policeman, it's probably pretty early for that, I would really like to get over this hump of what happened, or how what happened affected Asgore and Toriel's relationship, because I would like Kris to be in a better spot. And if we're going to tackle really difficult themes about what happened to Des, or kids going missing, a bunker, or whatever theory that you subscribe to, I think we're going to need Asgore on the same page, and for us to not have to talk about relationship squabbles in Chapter 6 or whenever that happens. So personally, it could happen in any way, of course, but I feel like we need to get Kris's family issues resolved as cleanly as they can be resolved. So moving forward, Asgore can devote his screen time and his character development to whatever happened with Des. And at this point we know, and honestly, I can't remember what video I saw it in, but I am convinced that Kris has surrounded themselves with all of the people they trust the most. Their mom, at this point their best friend, and then take your pick, either the cops or their dad. And I think while it might be funny for Undyne and Napstablook to show up, or one or the other, and to have them be in the story, if we want to keep it lighthearted, that might be the way he goes, and just not subvert our expectations and just bring in one of the cop characters or both of them. I think it would be really cool if Asgore pulls a Mr. Incredible and is listening in on like police calls or the radio and hears that someone slashed Toriel's tires and is like, yo, that's my family. Even if they're not, like, even if she's not with him, that's still like the mother of his kid and like foster mother of his adopted kid, and he still obviously really loves Kris. So even if it's misguided, he would probably get right over there. And so we know, like, he has a superhero comic book collection. He might have a hero complex in a way and want to be the one who saves everyone. And while I know Deltarune is not Undertale, they're not going to be one-to-one, characterizations of characters tend to stick or be slightly reimagined. So when we see Toriel as the overbearing protective parent and Asgore as I've done something wrong and I'm atoning, but I'm doing what's best for my people, that might be where he's at mentally. He's trying to make up for things either to Toriel or to Kris or to himself or to generally the public of Hometown, that he can still make a positive difference. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but I don't think so. I like Asgore a lot in Undertale, and regardless of the fact that he did something reprehensible, he is a morally gray character that clearly feels a regret and is doing things that he wouldn't do in any other circumstance if he wasn't trying to save everyone from subjugation. So I think it would be interesting if we use this dark world to explore the relationship between Toriel and Asgore. And forgive me if at any point I said Toriel and Undyne. I don't know why I keep saying that name in my head. I've had to correct myself in a couple of takes. But Toriel and Asgore have a relationship, obviously, as the parents of Kris, regardless of what their current standing is towards each other. And from what we've seen in Chapter 3, we already have a lot of dichotomy at play. We have La Niña and El Niña being like these little lovebird weather people. We have these mysterious characters that have been mentioned, Mike and Tina. And I'm not going to speculate on whether they're the main boss or the secret boss or whatever. I have no idea what the pattern is going to be for Toby in bringing up these secret characters like Jevil and Spamton. I have no idea if they're going to be whatever they're going to be. But the way I look at it, a lot of people, or at least some people in theories I've seen, have said that Mike could be microphone, it could be microwave, it could just be a character named Mike. I think it's going to be microphone specifically because it creates a dichotomy with Tina, where if Mike is the microphone and Tina is an antenna, it is the beginning and end of a recorded signal being sent and received. And that creates another dichotomy like the weather people, like Toriel and Asgore. I think this chapter might be a lot of duology, two things being juxtaposed, being contrasted. And I'd like to see a chapter like that play out because we would get to compare two things. And even if we don't go the Toriel Asgore route, we might get Undyne and Napstablook being compared. Even the green room is the comparison between Kris and Azrael, or how people view them. And if we want to speculate on the secret boss and the tendency for the secret bosses to be things that are discarded, I've heard people say the flowers in the garbage can, or the house phone because you have a cell phone now. But on the subject of Mike and Tina, you know, a cell phone has a microphone and an antenna. It might not even be the TV antenna. We might be completely misled that this boss is TV themed at all, because we've seen, like, you know, cowboy shows, all that stuff. The dark world might be TV themed, but the boss could just be signals. Maybe not just like signals as a concept, but we might be misled, and it could be phone signals, it could be radio waves. And if you are as deep in the Deltarune goofiness as I am, you've seen the chess theory, how we had King as the boss of Chapter 1, Queen as the boss of Chapter 2, and the next would be Rook. And Rook is a tower, and communication towers exist. And I've heard people mention a communication tower as tied into this TV boss, but I think it could go beyond just TV, and it could do with communication between people in general. And it could explore words and body language and thoughts and ideas being communicated from one person to another and how they can be misconstrued. I would imagine, just based on what I think would be funny, that La Nina and El Nino will be these cutesy lovebirds when you meet them and completely fall apart and hate each other by the end of the chapter. And I view Toriel as almost certainly a party member, because we need time to explore Kris's relationship with their mother. But Asgore is so separate. He's from somewhere else. He lives somewhere else. He's going to enter through the door and not be in the room when the Dark World spawns. He's going to take a more birdly role in this chapter, in my opinion, and he's going to be an outside character who might be working with the villain or be a secret character who's stalking you or something. It could be an Undertale simile, and it could be like, oh, you know, at the end of this long hallway, there's a powerful boss monster that you have to defeat to get out. I would imagine that this would be the perfect time to bring back fun callbacks to Undertale, because we're starting with Toriel and ending at Asgore, maybe? Obviously, it's all speculation, but I would love to explore the relationship between Kris's parents right now and get that out of the way. And we've even seen the little shot of Susie saying, like, you know, Kris, you know your family's weird. Your family? What do you mean your family? In this chapter, it might just be Toriel. That's why I just think it's going to be more people than that. It's going to be, I don't think Azrael is going to show up, but I am convinced Asgore is going to be in this chapter, and it's going to be about their relationship. Because I don't think coming off of a chapter about Undyne and Napstablook is going to prompt Susie to say your family's weird. She would just say your mom's weird, right? I feel like that's a giveaway that not a lot of people are digging into, unless I'm incorrect, and then I'll just put a picture of it on the screen like, oops, I'm an idiot. But if she says, hey, your family's weird, she just wouldn't get that from Toriel. I feel like Asgore has to show up. It would be funny if him and both of the other cops show up so we can get the full story about how he left the force without a full description of like what happened, if it has anything to do with deaths. It could be completely different. That could be a red herring. And I guess just to be funny, since there's only a few minutes left in the video, I could just throw in like, oh, by the way, Monster Kid's the Knight. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. So all that being said, this was my design for Toriel and Asgore possibly being in the Dark World. I think Toriel is going to be a party member, and I think as far as storytelling is concerned, this might be the moment where I expect my expectations to not be subverted. I feel like Toriel just being a mage that controls fire is just the easiest choice, and there's not, as far as I can think, I mean, obviously I don't own the story, I don't have all the chapters in my head like Toby does, but hey, my mic kind of died in the middle of recording, so I am going to record for the rest of the video on my phone, and sorry if it sounds bad. I'm going to get a new mic tomorrow, so I'll sound fine next week. But back to what I was saying, I don't think there's a reason for Toriel to have any kind of different fighting style or magic. Her Dark World self could just be a fire mage, unless there's some kind of fancy reason why Toriel should be a rogue or some kind of barbarian or a mafioso with a Tommy gun. I have no idea. But for now, my version of Toriel is just a fire mage. I've changed a little bit of her design from her basic Undertale design, just to modernize it a little bit. Not really modernize, but I gave it a couple little touches. I brought in a third color so that she's not just that indigo and purple. I think the pink is nice. I have no clue how Toriel and Ralsei are going to interact. I couldn't write a theory about that if you paid me. If there's one out there, link it in the comments. Toriel and Ralsei interacting is going to be straight nuts, and I think that's something that I'm not even factoring into my theory for Chapter 3. If Asgore and Toriel and Ralsei are in the same room, I seriously couldn't even tell you how that's going to go down, so I'm going to be delightfully surprised about that one. But my Asgore design, I've kind of kept him a royal looking warrior or knight. I put his floral pattern in the back, which is kind of fun, but I wanted his eyes to be covered because I think once Asgore is brought into the story in some kind of way, he's going to have to get over his denial first. So his original appearance in the Dark World for me has his eyes covered to imply that he's kind of blinded himself. He is rushing in thinking that he's going to play hero and that he's going to save his family, and it's not going to put his family back together in the way that he wants. But I think even if it can't, he will not care. He will still lay down his life to save Kris. If he'd lay down his life to save Toriel, even if there was no promise in them getting back together. I think that's what kind of character he's going to end up being. But hey, that's my speculation. but I like his eyes being covered. I like them kind of having matching outfits that can be contrasted. I think there's going to be a lot of explorations of relationship in the same way that Susie had to struggle with like being a bad guy, being perceived as a bad guy. And Noelle came to terms with like being controlled and her relationship with her mom and this kind of helpless deer in the headlights attitude where she freezes up and can't make decisions. Even in the weird route, you see that spurs her to be more self-sufficient and make decisions. So that's really the struggle that Noelle is facing in chapter 2 and probably onward into chapters 34 and beyond. But Toriel and Kris have family issues to be resolved. And if Susie's comment about Kris's family being weird is any indication, we should get closure on at least most of those issues by the end of this chapter in at least some funky way. But I'll probably get comments on who I think the knight is. I don't know if I'm fully prepared to give my thoughts on who I think the knight is, or if I think there are multiple knights. I think Alvin is super sus. I think Alphys is super sus. The two places where the Dark Worlds are places where Alfie sent the main characters. Alvin's drawing being in the classroom, Gerson being a teacher. I know there's talk about whether or not Miss Boom works at the library because Birdley isn't there when he says he's going to work for Miss Boom, but he could just be in the back. I don't know. You'd think he'd be at the front desk if he says he's going to leave to go work with Miss Boom. So we don't know where Miss Boom works or where she is. So I'm tentative to assign Alvin and Miss Boom to, the library and the classroom. But Alfie's sent them both there. But then again, if there are characters named King and Queen who are bosses, and then there is a knight, chess theory could be a big red herring. I don't know about chess theory. I don't know. But it would seem like the knight would be a darkener, but if they're doing things in the light world to open up dark worlds, then they're probably a lightener. In which case, who are they a knight for? Who are they serving? The Roaring? Are they serving Gaster? Who knows? I'm going to probably have a lot of fun theorizing about that after chapter 3 and 4 drop. But for now, I'm glad you enjoyed my drawing. If you made it this far in the video, thank you. Hit me with a like. Subscribe if you want to see more like this. I got a Pokemon video coming next week, and then I'm probably going to be doing more art tips. Persona video in the making. But yeah, these are my speculations and predictions for chapter 3 and 4. If none of them come true, that's totally fine. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts below. Maybe I overlooked something that made what I said completely impossible. But regardless of which way my prediction goes, I'm still going to love chapter 3 and 4 because, I don't know, Deltarune's goated. So yeah, thanks for watching Design Twist. I'm glad you liked it. Peace.